Albert von Buxhoeften was 18 years old when he first glimpsed the shores of Riga in 1298. The young German nobleman had no idea then that he would witness one of Christianity's most brutal and mystical conquest campaigns, which sought to acquire not only land and peoples, but souls as well. The Teutonic Order's Baltic expansion went far beyond mere military conquest. It represented a complex religious cultural transformation attempt that remains shrouded in mystery to this day. The Order's officials accompanied their military movements with special rituals from the very beginning. According to the Chronic of von Prusenland, every new city and territory had to be purified from pagan spirits through 3 days of fasting and nightly prayers. This was not merely a symbolic act. The chronicles report that the knights truly believed the Baltic region was filled with mystical forces that could only be overcome through sacred ceremonies. Bishop Albert, who was essentially the father of the Baltic Crusades, personally developed the strange ceremonies with which they could reconsecrate conquered pagan sanctuaries. The Heinrici Livoniae Chronicon describes in detail how such a ritual proceeded in Uxküll in 1218. The German priests first walked around the pagan sacrificial sites while singing Latin litanies, then sprinkled the area with holy water. Then came the most mystical part. At midnight, when the moon was full, the knights knelt in white cloaks at the site of the former pagan altar and took a strange oath whose text we do not know in its entirety to this day. The pagan Baltic tribes, Latvians, Estonians, Prussians, initially watched these strange ceremonies with bewilderment. For them, every part of nature was sacred, and they could not understand how a place could be purified from what was inherently sacred. This cultural and religious chasm led to those strange events that the knights called transformation experiments. The most bizarre event occurred in the winter of 1222 at Venden Castle. Grandmaster Hermann von Salza personally arrived in the Baltic territories to oversee the pagan transformation program. According to contemporary records, 40 Latvian and Estonian prisoners of war were locked in the castle's basement chambers and subjected to strange experiments for weeks. Every dawn they had to listen to Christian hymns, then at noon they had to memorize Latin prayers. In the evening, however, and this is the strangest part of the story, the prisoners were taken to an underground chamber where they were shown strange light phenomena. Gottfried von Hohenlohe, one of the Order's chroniclers, wrote about this. Such great wonder appeared in the eyes of the pagans that many of them, with tears on their faces, begged for the sacrament of baptism. What did those Baltic prisoners actually see in that underground chamber? The available sources are vague, but they refer to angelic lights and heavenly music. Modern historians suspect that the German knights used some kind of early optical equipment, mirrors, candles, and acoustic tricks to simulate supernatural phenomena. If you're interested in these medieval mysteries, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any exciting stories. The most shocking transformation experiment, however, occurred in 1228 at the ancient Prussian sanctuary of Romawi. This place was the central sanctuary of Baltic paganism, where sacrifices had been made for centuries in honor of Perkunas, the god of thunder. Konrad von Thüringen, the Teutonic Order's provincial master in Prussia, personally led the conversion campaign to this sacred site. According to the Scriptores Rerum Prussicarum, the German knights did not simply destroy the pagan sanctuary. Instead, they carried out a 3-month series of rituals during which they gradually transformed the pagan cult site into a Christian temple. Every week, one pagan symbol was replaced with a Christian symbol, accompanied by continuous prayers and ceremonial music. The strangest element was that the knights preserved some ancient pagan elements. For example, the sacred oak tree around which the Prussians had held their ceremonies for generations. This tree was not cut down but transformed into a Christian tree. A cross was carved into its trunk. Christian holy images were hung on its branches, and a Christian chapel was built around its roots. This procedure was so unusual in contemporary Christianity that Pope Gregory IX had to approve the Christian transformation of pagan elements in a special bull. The Prussian war leaders, especially the legendary Hercus Monte, initially watched these strange rituals with bewilderment. Monty himself participated in some transformation ceremonies, not voluntarily but as a prisoner, and later commented, "The German priests do not want to destroy our gods, but to make them their own." This remark is key to understanding the Teutonic Order's Baltic strategy. The Order recognized that the Baltic peoples could not be permanently converted through mere violence. Therefore, they developed a sophisticated syncretic approach. Pagan religious elements were gradually integrated into Christian liturgy to ease the transition. However, this strategy raised serious theological problems. Johann von Würzburg, the Order's chief theologian, wrote in his 1230 treatise, "Can the kingdom of Christ be built on pagan foundations? Or perhaps the Lord himself ordained that his ways should be inscrutable?" This question accompanied the Teutonic Order's Baltic conquests throughout. The most mystical ritual was the so-called blood transformation ceremony. This was first applied in Königsberg in 1232, when Ottokar II of Bohemia was also present as a supporter of the Crusade. During the ceremony, pagan warrior prisoners were transformed into Christian knights through a special ritual. The process lasted 7 days. On the first day, the pagan warrior had to lay down all his old weapons and armor at the foot of a cross, then walk through all the castle's chapels with a bare body, wearing only a rough monastic robe. On the second day, he had to fast while contemplating Christian knightly virtues. On the third day, he had to participate in a strange vision ritual, whose details the sources keep secret. The fourth and fifth days involved the expulsion of the old past. The candidate had to name every pagan deity he had ever worshipped, then reject them one by one. During this, the German priests continuously sang litanies and burned strange incense that allegedly drove pagan spirits from the body. On the sixth day came the reception of the Christian soul. The candidate was taken down to the castle chapel's crypt at dawn, where he had to spend a night in a special sarcophagus. The chronicles report that this sarcophagus was a Crusader knight's tomb, and it was believed that whoever spent a night in it would absorb the knight's Christian soul. On the seventh day, the rebirth ceremony took place. The candidate was dressed in full knightly armor, given a sword, and had to take a strange oath that related not only to the Christian faith, but also to the Teutonic Order's special Baltic mission. The strangest element, however, was that at the end of the ceremony, the newly transformed knight received a strange amulet, a small silver medallion that allegedly contained holy earth from the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, but mixed with Baltic soil. This symbolic mixture meant that the new knight served both the Holy Land crusading ideal and the Baltic conquest mission. Grandmaster Conrad von Jungingen wrote in a letter from 1393, "Our knights are not merely warriors, but spiritual transformers as well. They see a potential Christian knight in every pagan and a future Christian kingdom in every pagan land." However, the blood transformation ritual was not always successful. The chronicles report cases where the candidate could not endure the 7-day procedure. Some went mad under the visions of the sixth night, others simply escaped from the castle prison. The most shocking case occurred in 1245, when a Latvian nobleman, who had been Germanized as Berthold von Bruggenei, suddenly began shouting his old Baltic prayers in the middle of the ceremony and could only be calmed by forcing him into nightly prayer. But there were successful transformations as well. The most famous example is the case of Gideon, a Prussian warrior who underwent the ritual in 1248 and later became one of the Order's most loyal knights under the name Gotthelf von Rastenburg. Gotthelf himself described his experiences in a strange memoir. "When the sixth night passed and I arose from that stone coffin, I no longer felt pagan. It was as if another man's soul had moved into me." News of such transformations quickly spread throughout the Baltic region and provoked contradictory reactions. Some pagan tribes considered it a magical practice and secretly tried to copy the ritual themselves to transform their own prisoners into Baltic knights. Others viewed it as demonic practice, which led to the brutal Prussian uprisings of the 1250s. Hercus Monte, the legendary leader of Prussian resistance, commented on the German magical practices. "It is not enough for them to take our lands and temples, now they want to steal our souls as well." Monty himself organized the pagan reconversion ceremonies with which they tried to heal those Baltic warriors who had undergone the German rituals. These pagan reconversion ceremonies were no less bizarre than the German transformation rituals. Monty and his shamans believed that the German ceremonies stole the pagan warrior's ancient soul and implanted a foreign Christian soul in its place. Therefore, a warrior who returned from German captivity was subjected to a strange soul purification procedure. First, the returning warrior was kept in a forest hut for a week, where he could only drink water and eat roots. During this time, Baltic mythological stories were continuously told to him to evoke ancient memories. Then came a strange bathing ceremony. He had to bathe in a sacred lake, while the tribe's shamans danced around him singing Baltic prayers. The climax of the procedure was when the purified warrior had to drink a strange hallucinogenic potion made from mushroom extracts and forest medicinal plants. According to the shamans, this drink expelled foreign spirits and brought back the ancient Baltic spirit. Johannes von Posilga, the famous chronicler of the Teutonic order, wrote about these pagan anti-rituals. The pagans imitate our sacred ceremonies so masterfully as if they themselves were priests, only in the service of Satan. This religious magical war between the Teutonic order and the Baltic tribes continued until the 15th century and left such deep traces in the region that certain elements can still be found in Baltic folk culture today. The most interesting question, however, is how truly effective these strange rituals were. Were there actually psychological or sociological mechanisms that made them work? Or were they merely contemporary superstition and magical thinking? Modern psychologists and anthropologists believe that the blood transformation ritual was essentially an early brainwashing technique. The 7-day isolation, fasting, constant religious indoctrination, and strange vision ceremonies could indeed have been capable of shaking a prisoner's identity and building new loyalty. The angelic lights seen in the underground chamber were probably optical illusions created with torches, mirrors, and smoke. The heavenly music could have been some kind of early acoustic technique, for example, special construction of castle walls that amplified and distorted sounds. How conscious these psychological manipulations were is difficult to say. It's conceivable that the German knights truly believed in the magical power of the rituals, but it's also possible that Grand Master Hermann von Salza and the Order's chief officers consciously developed a sophisticated psychological warfare strategy. The Baltic conquests were characterized not only by religious rituals, but also by extremely hard-handed military tactics. The Teutonic Order's cavalry was brutally effective in winter campaigns. The German knights' heavy armor and long swords were ideal against the Baltic warriors' light weaponry. But what was truly decisive was the German castle administration and supply system. In every conquered territory, they immediately built a castle, and the castle was used not only as a military base, but also as a Christian cultural center. The castle housed a chapel, scriptorium, and often a school. Here they trained the new, transformed knights, copied religious codices, and planned further conquest campaigns. Perhaps the most brilliant element of the Teutonic Order's Baltic strategy was that it simultaneously pursued military conquest and cultural assimilation. In every new territory, they immediately began slow transformation. Pagan sanctuaries were converted into Christian chapels. Baltic warriors were trained as German knights, and local nobles were invested with German titles. However, this strategy was not only successful, but also extremely costly. The chronicles report that the Teutonic Order spent 60% of its annual income on the Baltic missionary program. The rituals, ceremonies, special equipment, and transformation projects were so expensive that the order often struggled with financial difficulties. Hermann von Salza himself complained in a letter to Pope Honorius IV, "Holy Father, acquiring pagan souls is more expensive than mining gold. Every transformed pagan warrior costs more than arming 5 Crusader knights." but the investment seemed to pay off. By the early 1300s, the Teutonic Order had successfully dominated the entire Baltic region and built a Christian state that lasted for almost 4 centuries. The ritually transformed local nobility loyally served the order, and the strange hybrid Christian Baltic culture created a stable social foundation for German rule. If you like this special story, share it with your friends and subscribe so you don't miss the next exciting episodes. Many more mysterious medieval stories await us. The most bizarre chapter of the Teutonic Order's Baltic conquests, however, was yet to come. Between 1327 and 1332, Grand Master Dietrich von Altenburg introduced a completely new type of transformation experiment, the Pagan Children's Christian Education Program. The idea seemed simple. If transforming adult pagans is difficult and expensive, why not start with children? From every conquered Baltic settlement, children between 7 and 14 years old were taken to German castles and subjected to complete Christian transformation. However, this program was much darker than it initially appeared. The Chronica Terrae Prussia writes about it. The German monks took pagan children from their parents as a wolf takes a lamb from the flock, and the children's weeping filled the entire province. At the center of the child transformation program was a special institution, the Conversionsschule, or Transformation School. The first was established in Marienburg in 1328, the order's central castle. Here, 40 pagan children were raised together with German knight boys, but according to extremely strict rules. The pagan children had to completely forget their previous lives. They could not speak their native language, could not mention their old names, and could not even tell about their dreams if they contained pagan memories. Instead, they received new Christian names, learned Latin, and prayed 5 hours every day. A detailed description of the program was left by Johann von Posilge. The pagan children say the Pater Noster 3 times every dawn, then study Latin grammar for an hour. Then they must contemplate Christian knightly virtues for half an hour. In the afternoon, they practice swordsmanship and horseback riding together with German knight boys. In the evening, they hold penance for an hour for their former pagan life. The most shocking element was that the children were also subjected to memory rituals. Every Friday, they were taken to a special room where Baltic objects, weapons, and symbols were shown to them, and they had to say they rejected them. If a child recognized any object, and thus a pagan memory, awakened in them, they had to fast for a week. The famous 19th century historian Johann Voigt commented on this system. The Teutonic Order essentially developed the first systematic brainwashing program in medieval Europe. They wanted to completely dismantle and rebuild the children's identity. But not every child could endure this procedure. The chronicles report that in 1331, 5 pagan children escaped from the Marienburg school and tried to return to their parents. They were captured and severely punished. For a month, they received only bread and water and had to say 15 Our Fathers every day. Even more tragic was that some children completely lost their identity. We know of cases where Baltic children who adapted too well to Christian education later fanatically hated their own folk culture and became the most ruthless in suppressing pagan uprisings. The most famous example is the son of Lithuanian nobleman Mindaugas, whom the Germans renamed Gottschalk. Gottschalk so enthusiastically adopted Christian knightly ideals that he later personally led German armies against his own father. The battle between Mindaugas and his son in 1332 was one of the saddest chapters in Baltic history. However, the Transformation School program led not only to human dramas, but also to certain cultural innovations. The coexistence of pagan children and German knight boys resulted in an unexpected synthesis. A strange hybrid culture emerged that combined Christian knightly ideals with Baltic warrior traditions. This hybrid culture created unique artistic and literary forms. In the Marienburg school, for example, ballads were born that told of Christian saints, but in Baltic epic form. One surviving manuscript begins the legend of St. George thus: "Listen, warriors, to the glorious deeds of the White Rider who defeated the Black Dragon as Percunus defeats the winter demons. The Teutonic Order's leaders were initially concerned about these cultural mixings. Grandmaster Dietrich von Altenburg wrote in a letter from 1331, "Does not Christian purity mix too much with pagan filth? Or perhaps the Lord willed that we proclaim his glory in new forms." The question was critical, not only theologically, but also politically. If German knights became too Balticized, could German rule be maintained long-term? But if they isolated themselves too strictly from local culture, would they be able to effectively rule the region? The Teutonic Order ultimately chose a pragmatic middle path. They maintained strict military and religious hierarchy, but allowed certain flexibility in cultural matters. This led to those strange Baltic German synthesis forms that became increasingly characteristic from the 1340s. Grandmaster Konrad von Jungingen summarized the situation in 1398. "Our knights are no longer purely German, but not Baltic either. They have created some new kind of Christianity that simultaneously serves the Lord and the spiritual needs of local peoples." However, this new identity was far from conflict-free. The mixed knights often had difficulty finding their place in either German or Baltic communities. They had strange psychological problems for which contemporary thinking had no answers. Gotthard von Meckenem, one of the order's priests, described these phenomena in detail in 1395. "We have knights who pray to Baltic gods in their dreams, but serve Christ while awake. Others say Christian prayers but make old pagan gestures at the same time. Is their soul Christian or pagan?" These spiritual dualities led to strange rituals. Special ceremonies were developed for knights with mixed identity, called spiritual unification ceremonies. On these occasions, the knight had to publicly unite Christian and pagan memories and create a unified Christian identity through a symbolic act. The strangest such ceremony took place in Königsberg in 1398, when 16 knights with mixed identity participated in a week-long spiritual integration ritual. During the ceremony, each knight had to tell their deepest pagan memory and then reinterpret it with Christian symbols. One participant, who had previously borne the Lithuanian name Algirdas and later became Albrecht von Rastenburg, wrote about the experience. "When I told how I prayed to forest spirits as a child, the German priests showed me that I was actually praying to Christ's angels. I just didn't know it. From then on, peace came to my heart." This strategy of Christian reinterpretation of pagan memories was extremely successful. With this method, the Teutonic Order did not simply suppress local culture, but incorporated it into its own religious system. This explains how it was able to build a sustainable Christian state in the pagan Baltic region for 4 centuries. The rituals and transformation experiments of the Baltic conquests were not only of local significance. The culture-mixing Christianization methods developed by the Teutonic Order served as models for other medieval missionary activities. Spanish conquistadors in America, Hungarians in the Carpathian Basin, and even Mongols in China applied similar cultural synthesis strategies. Thank you for watching this exciting historical journey into the mysterious world of the Teutonic Order. If you're curious about the further mysteries of knightly orders, medieval magical practices, and unknown chapters of the Crusades, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Share this special story with your friends, and see you in the next video. Next video: the Templar possessions of the Hungarian kingdom and King Andrew II's crusade.